we make a distinction in our work between business metrics and process metrics. And I don't want to make it sound like process metrics aren't important at all, but when you've got someone in the room who's got a P&L responsibility, they're really not going to pay a lot of attention until you stop talking about process metrics, likes and follows and click-through rates, all of which are important and valuable in their own way, but they're going to want to hear about business metrics,
Right.
revenue, profitability.
Today on Customer Land, I'm with Andrew Schulkind, and if you would, just raise your hand if you're familiar with any of Andrew's writings, because we publish them at least once a month here on the site, and he's always got something that seems like he's boiled the atmosphere down into things we need to pay attention to, which in marketing, atmosphere is everything. So anyway, Andrew, thanks for joining me. Been looking forward to this for a long, long time.
Thanks, Mike. Really great to be here. Excited to be here. And thanks for the very kind words of introduction. I almost raised my hand because I am familiar with not just my
work. You read it. Okay, good.
I do. And I just a shout out to anyone else who might be listening who isn't familiar with Customer Land that came here because of me. There are a lot of really great writers on that site. So definitely worth exploring.
Thanks. We keep trying to figure out how we can get together physically, because it would be one heck of a cocktail party.
That would be a lot of fun. Oh, please do put that together.
Yeah, I'll have my people work on it. So recently, Andrew wrote an article that we published called "Competing on Strategic Value in the Age of Good Enough." And it sparked a lot of conversation, some of which happened on LinkedIn, some of which happened in our office here, colleagues, because everybody's got something to say. I'll say in complete agreement with that idea. Like, boy, there's a lot of good enough out there. But Andrew pointed out that there are some pathways to kind of identifying when you're working on a good enough, I'm doing air quotes here, you can't see it, but on a good enough basis, and what you can do about it. But I think maybe just for broader introductions and context for this, Andrew, if you could just kind of tell us about your background, of what you're doing at Andigo, and we'll kind of set things up that way.
Sure. Andigo, I'll start there. Andigo is a content marketing firm that does website development as well. The two really worked well together for us. We actually got our start in website development and have been doing it long enough that there was a big sea change for us when Google, who was already dominant by the time, caught up with the black hat SEO folks who were putting white text on a white background and doing all sorts of other tricks, behind the scenes with meta tags, and finally really made a major factor, a major signal, the content on the page. And for us, since I'm primarily a writer, that was pretty remarkable and really allowed us to differentiate ourselves from our competitors and really have a much bigger impact on the outcomes for our clients. So that's who we are and what we do. We work mostly with B2B businesses in the $2 to $25 million range. And most frequently, although we have clients across a number of industries, we really seek out working with mission-driven businesses, B Corps and other folks like that, with multiple bottom line approach to what they're doing.
Which makes these conversations, whenever we get together, all the richer, because there's just so much to talk about there.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this article and the ideas behind it. Competing on strategic value in the age of good enough. And it seems to me that we would do well to kind of just set what good enough means and maybe give some examples of that. How does that look in your world?
So I think the first thing worth saying is that a lot of people think of this being a result of AI and just sort of the last 2 years and what has happened because of AI. And while AI has certainly accelerated, as it has accelerated so many things, it existed before then. The beginning of the pandemic was kind of a moment where this happened, where what we're seeing is that people with really big brains and a lot to offer in, typically in the marketing world, but other areas as well, are being devalued, or there is a big change in the way their work is valued. One example that comes to mind immediately is a branding expert that is a colleague of ours who is losing work to not entirely, not losing clients, but losing work because they'll take his basic work and have someone junior manage it for them and extend it. So instead of being hired to do an entire brand system that includes all the elements that they might need over the course of coming years, they'll ask them to do one-off project, design a PowerPoint template, and then some junior person in-house is going to take that information and turn it into whatever else they need in terms of collateral materials, or whatever else might come up, even elements for on-screen identifiers in a video, say. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I think that anyone who is in a creative field where there's a lot of work that goes into why you're doing what you're doing, but the output of your work is something that appears on screen, and there isn't necessarily a straight line to be drawn between the two, particularly for folks who don't have the vocabulary to talk about, in this case, design. We're seeing a lot of that devalued. So I think that that's hopefully a good example.
So I think there's a lot to talk about there in terms of what can be done, but I think maybe to just step back a few giant steps backward and talk about this idea of good enough. I mean, I've been hearing people in marketing talk about the new and the shiny since since I started in this space, which is a very, very long time ago. And that's all exciting. I have to tell you, I'm excited by some of the developments that I've seen along the way, and especially what it can do with AI. But it seems to take a look back, a kind of look in their rear view mirror to go, wait a second, I've kind of lost touch through these shiny and very cool and often very efficient driven developments. I've kind of lost touch with something that was crucial. And you don't really realize it at the moment. It tends to be, for me anyway, one of those reflections in hindsight going, there was a time when I could tell, or I could feel, or I could watch the glint in the customer's eye to really kind of get a sense of where this is going. So I think like the idea of, are we in the age of good enough? I think we've been in a very long, protracted age of good enough, but it just seems to be accelerated, and I think much more topically relevant right now because of the massive shifts in AI. And I don't need to editorialize, because I think everybody in marketing would have to agree on some level with that notion. It's just what do you do about it? Because losing touch with those things turn out to be critical.
Yeah. And I'd love to offer thoughts on what to do about it. Before that, though, I think you hit on a really good point, because it's not just accelerating. It feels like it's taken a giant leap in that. Whereas, the example I just gave, where there's a really great branding person whose output is graphic design, was, for a long time being pressured by junior level people who don't have that big brain, who don't have that, experience and perspective to do the work, to do the implementation. Now we're taking like another degree of separation away from the original impetus and experience, to someone who maybe doesn't have any design or branding experience and just has facility with AI tools. And absolutely something is lost along the way.
And often even further removed from the customer, from the people whose work they are supposed to be affecting, which I think is the real tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows. I think it does show.
It does show. And I can think of many, many aspects of marketing where that same phenomenon has taken place. Instance that comes to mind is just the over-reliance on digital signals to gauge customer engagement.
Right.
Where, look, they're all indicators, they're all good pointers, but it's not the full picture. I mean, to get the full picture, you really have to be side by side in the same room somehow with your customer, experiencing their experience with them somehow. And, lots of cool ways of doing that these days. But, for so many years, and it's still the case, when you're working on a digital campaign, the high level most meaningless metrics tend to be the ones that get talked about the most and have very little to do with the end result and end effect on the customer.
Yeah. Those are the metrics that are typically easiest to come by.
Right.
And the ones that you can have the most confidence in because they're easy to come by. They're easy to,
Right.
they're things that are easy to measure, but they're not. We make a distinction in our work between business metrics and process metrics. And I don't want to make it sound like process metrics aren't important at all, but when you've got someone in the room who's got a P&L responsibility, they're really not going to pay a lot of attention until you stop talking about process metrics, likes and follows and click-through rates, all of which are important and valuable in their own way, but they're going to want to hear about business metrics,
Right.
revenue and profitability. So
We were trying to get clever a couple of years ago. I was having a similar conversation with another colleague, and we ended up with ornamentrics that really look good. They look amazing. But, ultimately that's all they do is look good.
Oh, that's good. I might have to borrow that.
Please do. Yeah, make us famous. So, let's talk about some of the other ways. In fact, maybe we'll just bring this conversation forward into present day. AI is literally transforming everything. Is that the most overused phrase of the moment? Yes.
It's almost as overused as unprecedented was, sort of March
Right.
20.
Right. Unprecedented. And then we should have another one of these conversations just on the buzzwords in marketing and how they've evolved because there are so many of them. It's its own language culture.
Yeah.
But yes, AI is going to transform the world. It actually is. It actually is. We're having a lot of fun looking at and talking to business leaders who are applying AI thinking to every aspect of their business because it's literally transformative. And a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine, his company just raised, I think 20 million in seed round. And I thought that was interesting and, sent him a congratulations note and all that. But what was really interesting was he said, this company is an AI first company. We're building the entire model structure, people, processes, and technology around AI, which I think is really smart at the moment. I mean, those are people I don't think are looking at it from a good enough standpoint. They're really trying to accelerate.
Yeah.
But if you're coming from, let's just say, a legacy model, like marketing mostly tends to be, as many evolutions has been through, how do you avoid getting stuck in a good enough mindset? You can optimize for NPS, and that's good. You can optimize for CSAT, also good. You can optimize for loyalty, and that's good too. But here's the thing. If you're not optimizing for total customer value, for total customer profitability, then you're just optimizing for output, not the bottom line. Here's the truth. If your strategy isn't building better customers, more frequent, more loyal, more deeply bonded, then it's not a strategy, it's a performance. At Customerland Studio, we help brands find the value, find the opportunities, the force multipliers hiding inside the customer relationship. And then we help them optimize for scale, for yield, for profit across the entire relationship. Because the other thing we've learned, the only strategy that actually matters is the one that makes your customers more profitable. Customerland Studio, to make better customers. Go to customerland.net and click on the studio.
That's a good question, and I'm glad you brought up that example because it is worth saying that AI it remains to be seen what its overall, transformation will look like for human beings. But there's a lot of good. There's a lot of power there that can be used really effectively. And so, yeah, let's talk about that. I'll talk about it in a way that isn't necessarily AI related, though AI can certainly help in any of these steps. And I should also say that these concepts that I'm talking about, this sort of framework that I'm going to talk about, is not my original thinking. I wish I could find where I found this original, or I think I heard it on a podcast, but I just have not been able to find that in my notes. So I'll say we'll probably talk about this on a little bit more of a surface level, and happy to dive deeper into it if anyone
Sure.
wants to reach out. But because there's so much to cover, and I don't think we have that much time. So
We can talk fast, and
all
there's
right, I'll try and
can
talk
handle a
fast.
lot of that.
So the goal of the exercise of putting together this framework is to focus your marketing, and because of what we've just been talking about, the goal is to focus it on where the value is. So the first thing that we need to do, and this is marketing 101, is define your audience, right? So that's sort of the core. That's got to be the center of the onion, if you want to think of it that way. Or I've heard people do this inside of a triangle, and the audience is there. So for most of us, that's probably really going to mean an audience segment, right? Because if you've got separate audiences, you're going to want to do those audiences separately. And the key here really is to dive deeply. It's not just, a minute ago I talked about mission-driven businesses and B2B, $2 to $25 million. That's just not going to give you enough to work with. It's a start, but you're really going to have to go deeper. And that's why I think it's important to think about that in terms of audience segments. And
Can I
then
ask a quick question on that one? Because I think that's another one of these potentially dangerous dog-leg conversations, because there's so much to talk about there.
Yeah.
But at the initial stages of a marketing, call it exploration, engagement, when you really need to define your audience, there are a lot of ways of doing that. And I think there's a bit of disclarity. Is that even a word?
It is now.
Okay. All right. With the best ways to do that, and a lot of people kind of land on persona development, which can be really interesting, but you do a lot of this. So what's your particular method? What's your, how do you define, how does Andigo go about defining audiences and their tendencies, proclivities, and wants, desires?
For us, we haven't had the success, and I think it's because I don't have the experience with persona development, as I think most people in this audience in particular, would understand that. For us, it's conversations. We really want to have conversations with every different kind of role in your organization that is customer facing. We will even want to have conversations with roles that maybe aren't necessarily customer facing, but have great impact on how customers are going to perceive what you do. And so, talking to a product team and what they're developing and why they're developing it, is that coming out of a conversation with anyone else or not? And of course, we want to talk to customers and prospects, long-term customers, dissatisfied customers, everyone in between, because that, to us, is how you really paint the deeper picture, particularly if those conversations, and this can be a bit more of a challenge, go beyond that first phase of the conversation. The first part of the conversation where you're talking about, hey, I'm here to talk to you about how you use this product, and get into the conversation that comes naturally after that, which is, all right, well, what did this mean for your firm? How did that transform things? How did that make things better? What challenges does it present? Were there training issues? All the things that really go into what the power of the product is, what the outcomes your audience, your clients are achieving, because that is what's going to tell you what's really important to them, and that's going to should be focused on. So for me, that's more of the approach that we take. But
yeah, and believe me, I'm not trying to sell personas at all. I think it ends up being kind of a default because they're fairly easy to come by, but they also tend to be, my view, You don't get enough dimensionality out of most personas. You
I
you
agree.
just you just don't get enough there to really understand what you're working with. So maybe as a high level starting point, that works. But
Right.
you know, with a good CRM system and good data management and some smart people pushing the buttons there, you can understand so much more about your customers these days.
Absolutely, and that's not to give away the last act of the play here, but that's part of what we're going to talk about a little bit as we get through this.
So, one of the things you called out in your piece is this phrase, and I put it everywhere because I thought it was just a really intriguing and thought-provoking idea, which is desperate marketing does not attract eager buyers. And for a marketer, you'd have to sit back and go, "Well, I don't put out desperate content or desperate headlines or." And then if you really are honest with yourself, like you really, really go honest, you kind of have to start going, well, maybe I was a hair desperate. Maybe it was desperate within a safe lane. Okay, maybe it was totally desperate. Okay, maybe I got to change it
Yeah.
and spark some unraveling there. And is that maybe that's the peeling back of the onion you're talking about? I don't know.
Well, a little. I think that I mean, hopefully, this is a group of folks here who are well beyond the I don't know, the marketing equivalent of the just checking in email, which is you might as well say, "Hey, do you have any cash for me?" Right? Like that's and you know, if you are committed to content marketing and this idea that marketing in unless you're a you know a national consumer brand or just a national presence, the kind of marketing that so many of us did for so long just isn't nearly as effective. In part because of there's so much competition, there's so much noise out there. You've really got to offer value the vast majority of the time in the content you're putting out there. So. I think that's important. And one of the ways we do that is, you know, we've got this audience definition that we've created. And to avoid that kind of desperation, we want to make sure that the next layer that we're building on top of that is the problem that they are experiencing that you can help them solve, which is very different than the problem that you want to have because you know you can sell that service. And the tactic or the solution that you want to sell because you want to sell it. That starts to me smelling a little like desperation that is not full on desperate, hey, you know, going out of business sale kind of desperation, everything 50% off. Coming up with the thing that is either giving them heartburn during the day or it is keeping them up at night because they recognize it's holding their company back in some way, or they just recognize that, you know, it's costing them money. That's really what you want to identify, is issues like that, really needy business issues. So, you know, for us, part of our business being building websites, it's not a website. It's, you know, focusing on problems they have attracting the audience they want. Why is that failing? And what can we do to help it? Do we have a product that helps figure that out, diagnose it, and fix it? So to me, that is a key way of steering clear of even that somewhat acceptable desperation lane.
Yeah, maybe there's healthy levels of desperation just to keep you moving, you know.
Yeah.
Necessity is the mother of invention after all. Maybe there's desperation baked in there. You know, one of the things I'd love to get your just opinion on anecdotally is, and you mentioned a moment ago, if your if your unique selling proposition is more about something you want to sell rather than what your customer base really wants, the pain they need to solve, that's a problem. That is often it, that is often a conversation that marketers face early on in their client journeys. New client, whatever, you're coming in to fix something that's broken, and it often kind of boils down to that. You know, what are you really offering to solve your customer's pain? So anecdotally, we're not going to point fingers. We're certainly not going to name names, but how often do you see that phenomena in your world? Is it frequent? And I'll just say, if I may, I'll stop talking in a minute, let you get to, because we really want to hear you after all. Is
No,
that?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say that, in the startup world, especially in, SaaS startups, and there's a gabillion of them out there, I'm actually blown away at how many times the founder developer has built this amazing thing with very little understanding of the audience's market's needs for it. Like it's a lot. And that's just my world. What's your world?
I wish I could say it was enormously different. It is maybe not quite that bad, but I mean that brings to mind the old saw about falling in love with a problem, not a solution. Because the problem that if the problem is real, then the problem is real, and it hasn't gone away, and there's opportunity there. Your solution may not be as attractive to your audience as you would like it to be, just because it's your expertise and it is a nice brand extension or whatever the case may be. You can't fall in love with that and try and pound it through if that's just not where the market is.
So how does Andigo navigate that? Because a lot of times that's the company owner, the CEO, it's somebody senior who's going, this is our thing. It's my baby. It's, we've built
Yeah.
this thing with whatever. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, honestly, sometimes that's an intractable problem. Like this is what they're focused on. I'm like, okay, I can't think of an instance where it's been so bad that we've said, sorry, we have to walk away. There have been instances where I've pulled someone aside and said, hey, you're about to spend a ton of money doing this, and I don't think it's going to work because there's this underlying problem. And sometimes they're like, yeah, no, we get it, but that's the edict from, corporate, back in
Right.
Pacoima. So like, we got to go do that.
Right.
So yeah, sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's just, this is how we do things and this is how we're going to do things. But our approach is to have the conversation early enough that we're having the conversation about what the market thinks, not just I don't want to know about your solution yet. I want to know about what you're seeing in the market. What are they telling you? And is there anything there that we know we can latch onto as a good thing, or anything that we need to address because the market's just not getting it? And maybe it's good, and the market, you're just ahead of the market. We've got to figure out a way to change the way they're looking at it, or maybe it's that the market, you're just not aligned. So, yeah, that's a tough conversation, no question.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've spoken to a few, not many, like you said, uh, folks who have walked away from client relationships because there was just that, immovable object meets unstoppable force kind of dynamic. But it doesn't happen often. Most often you can kind of figure your way around it, or at least kind of do what you need to do and move on to the next problem to solve.
So, speaking of the next problem, that's kind of, the next layer of this onion that we've been talking about is, and a way around that problem that we were just talking about is to, having identified this problem, a real problem that is being solved, not jump right to your tactic or your solution or what you want to sell, but what's the outcome? Because that's what your prospect is really interested in. At some point, they want to figure out the details, the nuts and bolts of how we're going to get from here to there. But first, they want to go to there. Like, what does there look like? And focusing on identifying what that there is in all these cases, that's critical to winning them over, to getting them to continue the conversation. So I would say that that's probably the most important next step, and it is a nice counterpart that those two things work together, not just because, hey, you've identified a problem, you've identified an outcome, which of course naturally go together, but they give you two really nice options for your marketing, right? With the problem, you've got fear-based, marketing, pain point-based marketing, whatever you want to call it. And on the outcome level, you've got a more aspirational approach. You can achieve this goal is wonderfully powerful. So those are the things that we talk about, and we have just summed them up so quickly that I want to make sure people understand it ain't easy. Like this is really hard work to get these down to such fundamental issues that you can talk about them and people immediately understand that there's not a lot of explanation needed.
One of the things I love about the articles that you write and our interactions when we get to do these kinds of things is that you have a unique ability to, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier, to distill what's happening out in the marketing atmosphere down into things we should really be paying attention to. Like there's just so much in marketing. There are so many layers to the funnel, so many, psychological nodes and drivers that we need to pay attention to as to how our customers are responding to our efforts, and the CX and the loyalty and the data and the technology. And, marketing is this sprawling place that's so easy to get lost in it. And yet I think, and by the way, we publish all that stuff and I think it's all useful and valuable. But once a month or so, we publish something from Andy that tends to say, if you're able to clear the smoke and see above the clouds, here's a thing that you should probably be thinking about, like in its utter simplicity. And like Andy just said, Andrew, sorry, just said, it's not easy. It's not easy. But if you can keep the principles simplistic, I think you have a shot, because otherwise it's a shiny object, heaven out there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And thank you first for the very kind words. That's really lovely to hear. And it's not an accident, honestly. I mean, like this is like I'd rather be known as the marketing 101 person than some, really expert in some really esoteric field or aspect of marketing, because I think does get forgotten. I think we do value specialists much more than generalists, and blah blah blah. But I think there's really value to looking back at, especially now that there is so much happening so quickly, so much change. There are still these underlying marketing truths, marketing 101, that existed since, John Deere Company famously put out the Harrow, I think it was called. They put a newsletter out. I'm sure hand cranked printing press made it,
Right. On the mimeograph.
Right before the mimeograph. And they sent it to, their agricultural customers, right? Like farmers. And so those same ideas still apply. And if you can, meet people where they live, you're going to do a lot better than if you're trying to get them to come to you, whether it's for a new idea or just a new way of looking at things. It's that simplicity is important.
It's super important. Well, in the time we have left, maybe we could just kind of recap or encapsulate a couple of these core principles, because I think the takeaways here are really important.
Okay.
It's stuff that if you're in marketing, you probably just want to, put on a Post-it and keep it next to your computer, or, somehow keep these principles front and center. And I think, again, I don't want to steal your thunder because these are your thoughts and I only get to publish them. But competing on strategic value in the age of good enough is a concept worth paying attention to. And if you wouldn't mind, let's recap it from there.
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can recap it with sort of the last piece of the puzzle here, which is an email cadence that you can build on top of what we were just talking about in terms of, this little triangular diagram or onion, however you're thinking about it. And it gets down to real marketing basics like nurture and then sell. Make sure that you're understanding and gathering more information about your audience and what they're telling you, and make sure that you are marketing the value that they perceive and that they value, not the value that you ascribe, based on who makes the most money in your office or whatever it might be. And that email cadence is pretty simple. You're basically with the sort of three or so different pain points that you've identified and three or so different outcomes that you've identified, you can write an email about each of those. And right, so you've got 6 nurture emails, two each about each of the pain points, but one is about the pain, the other is about the outcome, and you'll get a sense of what they're responding to, assuming that you've got, you've built this intelligently and you've got calls to action or lead magnets or a combination. Then they're going to tell you what they value. And so now, in an age of good enough, in an age where like, oh, hey, that's a great idea. Let me see if I can get my AI to do it.
Right.
You're providing value that they might be willing to reach back out to you for, even if that is going to be for strategic input rather than implementation. Because, hey, we're going to have someone do this because they can do it good enough to use poor grammar. So I think that's what's critical, is gathering that information while at the same time making it clear that there is value that you offer, that there is great deal of thoughtfulness, experience that goes into the outcome that you want to get, and that outcome, sure, there are parts of that you can then implement less expensively, I guess, to sort of cut to the chase, or internally, or whatever the case may be. And that's nothing new. We were doing that for years, where we would do our very in-depth discovery process for website development, hand it off to our client, and they would do that with the actual development work with an overseas team. So yeah, as long as you're comfortable sometimes stepping on implementation to create the opportunity to provide the value, then you should be able to survive whatever the next 15 minutes or 15 months brings us in terms of AI and its impact on good enough being good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Because 15 months is now down to 15 minutes.
It sure
compacted
feels
and compressed. It's just crazy. Well, Andrew, first of all, I'm really glad we finally put this together, because we've been talking about it, kind of dancing around this idea for a long, long time. These are always rich conversations. And again, I want to encourage you to read Andrew's. He's basically got an archive of really solid marketing thinking on customer land. So you can find his work there. But Andrew, thanks. Let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. This has been a real pleasure. Love talking to you, as always.